Hi everyone, Kay Berkner here today with Dr. Tom Phelan, author and creator of 123 Magic and the author of the Manage Your Mom Epidemic. Dr. Phelan, welcome.
Good afternoon, Kay.
How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. Still stuck with winter, but we're doing good.
It's a little icy, but not quite as icy as it was here. So hope everyone is being careful as they're outside in their respective winter weathers. Today, we are going to be talking about a topic that is one that we get a lot of questions about here at 123 Magic, and that is tantrums. So Dr. Phelan, can you first tell us, and I'm sure everybody who's watching, you kind of know in your gut what a tantrum is. So Dr. Phelan, tell us, why do kids have tantrums?
Well, I think if you think about why kids have tantrums, think about the word request. And there are three kinds of requests. It means that kids make requests of you. They want a thing, like a lollipop at 6:30 in the morning. They want an activity. They want to use your iPad 10 minutes before dinner. Those are child requests. And if they're not granted, kids of a certain age will tend to tantrum. The third kind of request is a parental request. And that is that you, my dear, age 4, go to bed and stay in bed. And you don't want to do that. So you may do a tantrum when I do the request. So you always think a request of some kind is a cue. Maybe it's time for a tantrum. I got to be on the lookout. I have to be ready for it.
Absolutely. Now, tantrums can be so frustrating as a parent because either you've had to say no to something that your child wants, or you're trying to get them to do something that they don't want to do. And it can feel like it's just happening all the time. How frequently should parents expect tantrums to be happening with kids?
Well, you want to think a couple of things. One is the age for tantrums is about 1.5 years to age 5 years. So that's when you're going to get a lot of them. If you start getting them after 5 years, we're going to get concerned and we might want to do an evaluation. You're not going to get so many before 1.5 years. You can get them when the kids start walking. If you get a walker at 12, 13 months and so on, you can start getting tantrums then too. But you want to think that's the age for tantrums. So 20% of 2 to 3 year olds are going to tantrum daily, if that helps you. It gives you some idea of the frequency, but they're going to be very frequent. And the second thing is I found very reassuring for parents to know is that tantrums are usually caused by good parenting. So you get this angry face screaming at you, tear, they want to hit you and all this kind of, you feel like you did something wrong, don't you? Sure you do, but you didn't. It was usually good parenting that triggers tantrums in kids of a certain age.
Absolutely, because often the things that we're saying no to as parents are cookies right before dinner, candy in the middle of the day, doing something dangerous. Yeah. Mommy, can I jump off the 5th step is one that I've heard at my house. And you say no, and the kid gets mad, but it's really because you're looking out for their safety, right? Their safety and their health, and right, and making sure that they're happy and healthy and comfortable. So
yeah, you're setting a limit that they don't like.
Right, absolutely. So if a child does start to have a tantrum, what steps do you recommend that parents take?
Well, the first thing I want to back up just a second, because there's one intervention that you can use that can make a big difference. And that is, if the child's request is reasonable, give it to them. So if you said, okay, I want a cookie in the middle of the afternoon at 3 o'clock, that's okay. We're not eating till 6. That's fine. So one thing is to grant their request. You don't grant their request after the tantrum starts. Right? So the second thing you want to do is when there's a request that you're not going to grant, you want to do what I call a good veto. A good veto is short, one explanation if absolutely necessary, and it's followed by silence. Okay, so can I have a cookie at 10 minutes before dinner? No, it'll spoil your appetite. That's it. And then you're not going to argue. They can scream, yell, do whatever they want to, but you're not going to continue to talk. And that's also in the category of prevention. So those first 2 tactics I talked about, give them what they want. You can't always do that. Do a good veto. Those 2 are prevention tactics.
Got it. So, and I do think that first one is so interesting because particularly at age 2 or 3, kids ask for a lot of things, right? There's sort of a constant mommy, 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 can I, may I, I want. And so sort of your knee-jerk reaction as a parent can be to just sort of get in the habit of saying no. And I know that I personally have had it happen to me where I've said no to something and my child gets mad, and I'm thinking to myself, why did I say no to that? Like, I didn't need to. I could have just said yes. It wouldn't have hurt anything. It wouldn't have interfered with anything. And then we wouldn't be doing this thing we're doing right here. So how can parents kind of avoid that knee-jerk reaction and not sort of create a conflict where one doesn't need to exist? Uh-oh, I think Dr. Phelan may have frozen on us for a minute here. So just a quick recap, Dr. Phelan was saying before a tantrum starts, there are kind of two things that you can do. You can either, A, just say yes to whatever your child is asking for, assuming that it is reasonable, that it is safe, that aligns with, sort of the rules that you've set in your house. And then if you're going to say no, make sure that it's a good veto. It's brief, it's short, you can give a short explanation. But you're not going to turn it into a long conversation. Dr. Phelan, I think you're back. Hi.
Yeah, I'm back.
All right, terrific. So I was just sort of recapping what you had just said about what you can do before a tantrum starts. So say a tantrum has started, child is in full meltdown mode. What should parents do at this point?
Okay. First thing to do is you don't talk, like you were talking about, you don't talk or argue with the tantruming child. You do what I call check out. And that means you break eye contact, you increase physical distance if you can. Depends, you're the grocery store and they're in the cart and they're screaming, they're right here. What I used to do is I would turn the cart around and push them the other direction. So that's checking out, literally and otherwise. So they are away from me, they're going the other direction. But you don't talk, increase physical distance, don't do eye contact, and so on. And then depending on where you are, you can follow up with that. Sometimes you then just have to wait the tantrum out. You have to keep in mind, sometimes the worst thing to do is to give them what they want. That'll end the tantrum in the grocery store, but it's also going to reinforce tantrums in the future. So that's what you don't want to do. But that's the moment you're talking about when the tantrum starts, that's the moment of temporary insanity in us parents. Because like, oh my God, especially in public, you think, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. What am I going to do? You got to check out, you got to keep quiet, and you don't argue with them.
Got it. Terrific. So we will frequently get questions about how to manage tantrums sort of in different situations or different behaviors as they relate to maybe tantrums and timeout, for instance. So I think probably the biggest one that we get is, what do I do if my child starts to have a tantrum at bedtime?
Yeah. Okay. Now bedtime. So the request from the parent is that the child go to bed. And a lot of kids are okay until you actually leave the room. And that's when they will blow up and so on. So what we're going to do, we're going to combine our rules here, and we're going to use some of our rules for start behavior or positive behavior, which requires routines. So we're going to have a routine, means 9 o'clock is bedtime. I leave the room at bedtime, and that's the end of it. I'm not talking to you, and you're not leaving the room after bedtime. So you start tantruming, I'm not talking to you, you're not leaving the room. So what am I going to do? Well, I may have to do what we call the cut them off at the pass routine and park myself in a chair in the door until you go to sleep and stop having your tantrum. And that's a very unpleasant thing to go through. But we're going to use some of our start behavior tactics and some of our tantrum tactics right at the same time. The other thing, you don't want to be surprised. I've had parents whose kids will tantrum every night when the parent leaves. And one dad said, it was funny, he said, we have a routine for everything, bed, brush, bath, story, and all that, and the child tantrums anyway. And I said to the dad, you're missing one routine. You don't have a routine for the tantrum. So if they're going to tantrum every night, you got to be ready for it, know exactly what you're going to do. And you're going to leave them in there until they quiet down and go to sleep. Not fun. Is that a cry it out kind of thing? Yeah, it is a cry it out tactic. But it'll work after a while if you don't go back in and talk to them.
Sure. And there's a difference between, cry it out for sleep training and cry it out, whereas you're kind of allowing your child to have their emotions and experience those emotions, and kind of give them the space to sort of calm down a little bit and to come down from that sort of emotional high.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions that we often get is, do you use rest period or timeout for tantrums?
Yes, you can. So if the child has started the tantrum and you've checked out, what some parents will do is they will use a tactic. It's kind of a combination of a consequence and a separation. Some parents will say, for example, tantrums are for your room. So if you're going to have a tantrum, you can go in the room and finish it. If the child's real little, you might put them in a pack and play or something like that. So it's kind of a consequence and it's kind of a separation at the same time. All of this is done very gently without the talking that I was talking about before. And that's one of the hardest things because as a parent, you get so mad, you feel this is so unfair. They're treating me, I didn't do anything wrong, and they're treating me like this. This is terrible. And so you want to argue or you want to yell, and some parents hit. Kids who are tantruming are very vulnerable to getting hit by their moms and dads, and that's why you need to know what to do that doesn't involve physical abuse.
Sure. So then, very much related to that, what do you do if your child starts to have a tantrum as they are sent to rest period? So say they've gotten to a 3 count for something else that's not a tantrum. Maybe they were jumping on the couch and wouldn't stop doing it. They got to the 3 count, they got sent to their room, and as soon as you've said that's 3, take 5, they start to have a tantrum. Yep. How do you handle that at that point?
I'll tell you what I used to do with my son. If he starts tantruming, so he hit a 3, so now he's supposed to go to rest period or timeout. The issue now is he going on his own or not? My son used to tantrum and go to his room at the same time. So he'd be yelling and screaming and pounding the walls and all that. And with him, because he was a live wire, I would not say anything at all as long as he was going to his room. If the child is not going to the room and they're tantruming, if they're little, I'm going to escort them or even carry them to their room gently again. If they're big and they're as big as me and I can't escort them to the room, we're going to use what we call a timeout or rest period alternative. And I'll discuss this with them at some time when it's not hitting the fan, that instead of timeout, there may be a fine, maybe earlier bedtime, maybe a restriction of electronic privilege or something like that. But we'll use something different for the big kids that we can't escort to the room. But it's an emotional experience. Again, like you said, tantrums are very emotional. And so in those circumstances, it's very important to have in mind what you're going to do, know what you're going to do beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not only the child who's experiencing big emotions in that moment, it's the parent as well, whether it's embarrassment because your child is being very loud and yelling because you're out in public, or frustration because you're trying to get out the door quickly, or because they've continued to do something that they're not supposed to be doing. It can be emotional on both sides of it, and absolutely having a plan and knowing what you're going to do really takes a lot of that negative emotion out of it for you as a parent.
I think it does. And another thing that I haven't always mentioned before, but I think can be important, is after the tantrum is over, as a parent, you have to get used to forgiving. So you got to forgive yourself. I didn't do anything wrong. I was a good parent that caused the tantrum. Why did they have the tantrum? Because they're 3 years old, and 3 years old kids have tantrums. But I've got to forgive and then go on. And you have to do that over. If it were an adult, you'd have different reactions to the tantrum. But in a little kid, it's like, okay, here we go again. Oh my goodness. But I have to forgive afterwards, and we start over. And that takes a lot of work.
Absolutely. But in the long term, I think, I know you can sort of hold on to that, right? And be kind of extra grumpy with your kid if they've been behaving poorly in the morning and you're grumpy then in the afternoon. You can get to the end of the day and kind of feel guilty about that. Or if I've been having a rough week, I might look back on the week and be like, I really, that was not my best week, if you will. And so being able to kind of forgive that and just let it go really will help you in the long run as well, because then you don't carry around any sort of like guilt or feeling bad about how you reacted in that situation either.
I think it's a good point. Your point is, don't hold a grudge against yourself or against your child for whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Which can be hard to remember in the moment, but it's helpful in the long run.
Who
Well,
invented
terrific.
it anyway?
Thank you so much, Dr. Phelan. This has been great. If tantrums is a topic that you would like to go deeper into, Dr. Phelan is going to be doing a free seminar next week. We'll post that on the Facebook page, but you can also sign up for our newsletter at 123magic.com, and we'll send out that registration link, as well as other parenting tips, downloadables, and more. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.